The terminal at JFK International Airport was humming with its usual polished chaos. Heels clicked on the shiny floors like ticking metronomes, and overpriced espressos swirled in sleek paper cups. Flight announcements echoed from the high glass ceilings. Among the hustle of luxury luggage and tailored suits, no one gave the man in the dark gray jacket a second look. That was exactly how he liked it. Keanu Reeves moved through the crowd with quiet certainty. His steps were slow and unhurried, his posture relaxed. He had a worn leather satchel slung over his shoulder. His clothes, though clean and simple, set him apart in a crowd used to bespoke blazers and expensive cashmere wraps. He wore black jeans, weathered boots, and a faded navy t-shirt under a simple canvas jacket. His attire wasn't flashy, but there was something about him, a stillness, a calm that seemed to bend the space around him. He held a first-class boarding pass for Atlantic Air Flight 447 to Zurich, Seat 1A, printed under the name K. Charles. No frills, no status flaunted, just a man traveling alone. The gate agent barely glanced at him when she scanned his pass. "First class, all the way up," she muttered without a smile. Keanu nodded politely and stepped onto the jet bridge, disappearing into the quiet, luxurious cabin of Atlantic Air's flagship international flight. Inside the plane, everything glowed in warm amber tones. Polished wood panels reflected soft lighting, like the inside of a private club. Leather seats that recline into beds, glass partitions for privacy, gourmet menus already tucked into the seatbacks. It was luxury tailored for the elite. But when Keanu reached Seat 1A, he stopped. Someone was already sitting there. A man in his mid-50s, pale with sharp features and a salt-and-pepper haircut, was sprawled in the seat like it was designed for him. One leg was crossed over the other, a flute of champagne in his hand, scrolling through emails with the confidence of someone who never hears no. Keanu glanced at his boarding pass again and then turned toward the flight attendant, a tall blonde woman adjusting glasses of rose on a tray. Her name tag read Elise. "Excuse me," Keanu said, his voice calm and low. "I believe that's my seat." Elise looked him over briefly and gave a practiced smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to step aside just for a moment. We've had a last-minute seating adjustment. That seat has been reassigned." She hadn't asked for his name, hadn't checked his ticket. She just delivered a polite, polished brush-off. Keanu didn't argue. He didn't get upset. He simply tilted his head slightly and said, "I wasn't informed of any change. That's my assigned seat. Paid for. Confirmed." Elise lowered her voice, almost like she was doing him a favor. "We had a priority request from one of our Platinum Legacy clients. We're asking for your cooperation," she said, gesturing toward business class, row 17. It was still nice, but not where Keanu belonged. Keanu looked at her, then back at the man lounging in 1A. The man didn't even glance up. Keanu understood what was going on. But he didn't say anything. Not yet. Business class was quieter than economy, but it still wasn't first class. Not in the way that mattered. Keanu settled into seat 17C without a word. Around him, other passengers shifted and arranged themselves with the practiced ease of frequent flyers. Silk scarves, silver cufflinks, brushed wool. They stole sideways glances at him, then quickly looked away. He could feel the invisible lines forming, the ones he had walked through all his life. Today, they pressed harder. He adjusted his satchel beneath the seat and leaned back. The flight hadn't even taken off yet, but the altitude of judgment was already suffocating. 2 rows ahead, a woman in her early 40s leaned toward her husband and whispered something. Her voice was low, but not low enough. Maybe he used points. They've gotten lax with upgrades lately. Her husband didn't bother to whisper. Or maybe he won a contest, he muttered, his eyes never leaving his tablet. Looks like one of those down-on-their-luck indie types. Probably writes poetry in Brooklyn. Keanu smiled slightly. It was an expression that didn't reach his eyes. He had heard worse. He had lived through worse. But this wasn't about him anymore. This was about what still passed for normal at 38,000 feet. As the rest of the passengers boarded, the first-class curtain remained open just long enough for Keanu to catch a glimpse of Elise leaning toward the man in 1A. His name was Gregory Thorne. Keanu recognized the name now. Thorne was an investor known more for his headlines than his portfolio. 2 years ago, he had claimed on a live panel that equality is great for marketing but disastrous for margins. There had never been an apology. And now here he was, sitting in the seat that Keanu had paid for. Keanu looked down at his phone. One unread notification glowed at the bottom of the screen. Protocol ready. He tapped the icon. A dark screen loaded. A simple prompt blinked at him. Initiate Clause 7C? Reason: Operational Ethics Breach. His thumb hovered over the screen. Then, with a quiet tap, he pressed confirm. There was no sound, no spotlight. Just a silent command. No one around him noticed. Not the couple still discussing his shoes, not the man reading The Economist, not even the little boy across the aisle. The boy, maybe 8 or 9 years old, stared at Keanu like he was trying to place his face. Then the boy leaned toward his mother and whispered, "Is that Neo?" The mother glanced over and offered a polite, uncertain smile. Keanu met her gaze and nodded just slightly. A moment later, the curtain closed, and first class disappeared from view. But the shift had already begun. Not in the cabin, in the system. The cabin settled into its polished rhythm. Champagne corks popped in first class, while the hum of safety announcements buzzed overhead in the back. But beneath the surface, the tension hadn't gone away. It had merely changed compartments. From seat 17C, Keanu sat still, eyes lowered to the in-flight magazine he wasn't reading. He could feel the weight of stares. Not the loud, obvious kind, but the kind that linger just a little too long before darting away. The kind of stares that are judged without speaking, condemned without trial. The mother sitting beside him shifted slightly, her posture stiffening as a flight attendant passed her by for the second time without offering a blanket or even a smile. She glanced at Keanu and offered a look that said, "It's not just you." Across the aisle, the child whispered again, louder this time. "That is Neo. I'm sure." The mother replied gently, "Let people have their peace, baby." The boy didn't understand. "Why did they make him move?" he asked. Keanu didn't answer. But the words hung in the air, honest, innocent, and all too real. Minutes passed, then came the smallest sound, an alert tone from somewhere deep in the aircraft systems. It was barely noticeable. But in the flight manager's galley station, a notification pulsed red on a secured screen. Declan Rivers, the onboard flight operations manager, stared at the message in disbelief. Incoming Clause 7C. Priority flagged. Initiated by verified authority /K Charles. Do not override. He blinked, then blinked again. Clause 7C? That was a major breach flag. He checked the flight manifest. Row 17C, Charles. His eyes widened. Back in first class, Gregory Thorne poured himself a second glass of champagne. "You'd think these people would know their place," he muttered, half to himself. The woman beside him, a sleek executive type, offered only a tight smile and sipped her wine. Thorne grinned. "Luxury's getting crowded, don't you think? Feels like flying a private jet with economy strapped to the back." A few passengers chuckled under their breath. The rest stared straight ahead, pretending they hadn't heard. In row 3, a man in a suit looked up from his laptop and murmured to his wife, "Wasn't that guy in first class before?" "Must have been upgraded by mistake," she whispered. "Doesn't look like he belongs here." No one questioned the assumption. No one defended him. Not a single voice challenged the narrative. But somewhere between silence and complicity, the atmosphere shifted. And so did the system. In Zurich, phones began to vibrate. At Atlantic Air's corporate headquarters in Manhattan, the first signs of change started to ripple through the system. Something had just happened. And the people who ran things knew that things would never be the same again. A legal advisor looked at her computer screen, frowned, and said out loud, "What is Class 7C doing in the middle of the flight?" But the man who made it happen was still sitting quietly in seat 17C. His legs were crossed, and his notebook was open. He wasn't writing down notes, though. He was keeping track of something. And when the moment came, no one on the plane would be able to say they didn't know what was going to happen, because they all did. They just chose to stay quiet. If you're still here, comment 8 to let us know you're watching. The curtain between the front and back of the plane swayed slightly as someone moved down the aisle. The plane, Flight 447, had leveled out in the sky, flying at 38,000 feet. Outside, all you could see was the big ocean below. Inside, the plane was very quiet and fancy. But in seat 17C, Keanu Reeves sat like a rock in the middle of a storm no one else could see. His notebook was open, filled with numbers, initials, and phrases like optics override, thorn flagged, and internal bias correlation. But the pen in his hand had stopped. His fingers hovered over a different device now, a black phone with no name on it. The phone just had a glowing screen and a fingerprint scanner in the middle. Keanu put his thumb on it, and the phone blinked once. Authentication verified. Welcome K. Charles. Volta Systems Live, the phone said. Then it asked him, Trigger Clause 7C. Operational Ethics Breach. Target, Atlantic Air 447, Real-Time Activation. Warning, Irreversible. Keanu stared at it for a moment. He thought of Elisa's voice. It was sweet but serious, telling him to move without even checking his name. He thought of Gregory Thorne, who was drinking champagne and making rude comments that felt like they belonged to a time long ago. He thought of the little child sitting next to him, asking why no one was speaking up. And then Keanu pressed confirm. The phone screen went dark. No sound, no announcement, no one noticed anything. But in other parts of the plane, things started to change. In Zurich, at Valta Capital, an operations director got an alert in the middle of the night. At Atlantic Air's legal department, a red warning popped up on the screen during a boring meeting about brand identity. And inside the cockpit of Flight 447, a green message popped up on the crew's tablet. It said, Compliance Check Clause 7C in review. Executive monitoring is active. But none of the passengers noticed. Not the man sitting across from Keanu, scrolling through property listings. Not the older woman up ahead, who was dabbing her lips with a fancy napkin. And certainly not Elise, the flight attendant, who was talking to another worker near the first-class section about dinner and who might be sitting in 1A next week. The curtain between the first class and the rest of the plane moved again. Then a voice, soft and careful, broke the silence. "Excuse me, sir?" It was Miles, the young flight attendant, probably around 25 years old. He looked nervous. He held a tablet in one hand and seemed unsure of himself. I just wanted to confirm. You're Mr. K. Charles." Keanu didn't smile. He just nodded once, calm and measured. Miles swallowed hard. Protocol 7C, activated, he read from his tablet. His eyes looked back and forth from the tablet to Keanu. "I think there's been an error, or maybe not," he stammered. "Miles," Keanu said gently, "you're doing fine." Miles understood right away that whatever was happening, Keanu wasn't just another passenger anymore. He was the reason the plane would land differently than it took off. And Miles wasn't the only one starting to figure it out. Far away, in the sky over the Atlantic Ocean, Flight 447 kept flying, as if nothing had changed. But something had. The cabin, which was usually quiet and perfect, started to feel wrong. In the front of the plane, everything was still very fancy. The air was cold and just right. Napkins were folded neatly, and champagne glasses clinked like beautiful music. But something was changing in the air, like before a storm. Gregory Thorne, sitting in seat 1A, leaned back in his leather chair and kept talking. "You know what I hate about flying commercials?" he said loudly, not caring who heard. "You pay for quiet, but you still have to share the air with everyone else." No one laughed, but no one told him to be quiet, either. A few seats behind him, a woman looked up from her book and noticed something. She had overheard Elise, the flight attendant, saying something just a few moments earlier. "He doesn't look like he belongs here," Elise had whispered. And that was before everything changed. Back in the crew area, Elise stared at her tablet. A red message flashed on the screen. It said, "Compliance alert. Executive oversight activated. Do not interfere." Next to her, Declan, the flight manager, looked worried. "I don't know who Charles is," he whispered into his earpiece. But Zurich Legal just flagged him as a confirmed stakeholder. "That's impossible," Elise said. "He's in seat 17C. Her breath caught in her throat. "What?" she whispered. At the back of the plane, Keanu sat calmly in seat 17C, flipping through the magazine, but not really reading it. He was just waiting. The child sitting across from him stared at him with wide eyes. A few rows back, a college student named Tessa Green was posting on social media. She didn't know who the man was at first, but when she zoomed in on his face during a video, she froze. "Wait, is that Keanu Reeves?" she wrote in her post. The video was shared everywhere, and soon it had hundreds of thousands of views. People weren't laughing anymore. They were watching closely, and some were feeling upset. In the galley, Miles, the flight attendant, was shaking. He had heard Elise earlier saying, "The man in 1A asked for no one to sit next to him. I mean, just look at him." He didn't say anything, but now even understood. They hadn't just upset a customer. They had changed everything. Back in seat 17C, Keanu closed the magazine and set it aside. He stared ahead, waiting for what would come next. At exactly 3:17 p.m., Zurich time, every screen in Atlantic Air's office blinked at the same time. A red bar appeared on the master terminal, saying, "Cloud 7C activated. Live oversight engaged. Ownership verification confirmed." The operations director in Zurich, who was halfway through drinking a latte during a meeting, dropped her drink in surprise. She grabbed her phone and called legal. "Who is Charles?" she asked. "And why does the system say he owns a controlling interest?" There was silence on the other end of the phone. "He's real," the person on the other end said. "Zurich just confirmed it. That's Keanu Reeves." Back on Flight 447, most passengers still didn't know what was happening. But in the crew area, Elisa's hands were shaking as she read the crew feed. The photo was clear. Keanu Reeves was the owner. He had just bought a 48% share of Valta Capital, making him the one in control. Her tablet almost slipped from her hands. At the same time, Gregory Thorne kept talking proudly, not noticing the trouble happening just outside his fancy, rich bubble. "I swear," he said to the woman sitting next to him, "if we keep letting just anyone into first class, soon it will feel like a free bus ride. Honestly, it's not about race. It's about class. Some people just don't know how to act when they're here." The woman didn't say anything. She just reached slowly for her glass of wine and took a little sip. Her hand was shaking. Back in business class, people were already whispering. Phones lit up with texts. Quiet voices filled the air. "Is that really him? He's the owner? Wait, what is Clause 7C?" someone asked. He's the reason the company's stock is crashing right now, another person said. Far away in New York, a company called Volta Capital had started trading. Its computer had begun selling lots of shares from a company called Atlantic Air. It was done very carefully and fast. In 90 seconds, the price of the stock dropped 12%. After 3 minutes, it dropped 27%. Then the news showed up on TV, Atlantic Air falling fast because of a fight with its owner. Inside the plane, everything felt different. Miles, a young flight attendant, walked past Keanu's seat again and again. Each time he walked slower. His eyes glanced at Keanu, the man sitting so calmly, even though a big storm was happening because of him. Keanu didn't say anything loud. He didn't yell. He just tapped his phone again. He sent another code. Another rule had started working. This wasn't about revenge. It was about fixing what was wrong. Suddenly, the curtain to first class opened. Declan came out. He looked pale and nervous. He walked toward seat 17C, crouching like he had to give bad news to a king. "Mr. Charles," he said, trying to sound normal. "Something has happened. Zurich called us. They say it's all a mistake. They want to fix it." Keanu didn't move. He didn't even blink. He just said, "It's not a mistake, Declan." Then he stood up slowly and took his coat. Everyone watched him in total silence. He didn't go back to his old seat. He walked forward, back to the front of the plane. The walk from row 17 to first class wasn't far, but it felt like a big deal. It was like the aisle was a line between two different worlds. One side watched him with respect. The other side couldn't believe what was happening. Keanu's steps were slow and calm. Not angry. Just sure of himself. Everyone is watching him now. People who had ignored him before now whispered about him. They used to laugh at his clothes. But now they realized they were wrong. The silence was loud now. Everyone felt something. As Keanu got to first class, the warm golden lights didn't feel nice anymore. They felt like a spotlight. Declan stood to the side, smiling nervously. "Mr. Charles, your original seat is ready. On behalf of the crew, I'd like to say." But Keanu walked right past him without saying anything. Gregory Thorne, still sitting in seat 1A, looked up at Keanu. His smirk faded. "You again?" he said. "Weren't you told to leave?" Keanu didn't answer right away. He waited. Let the awkward moment grow. Then he said in a calm, soft voice, "You thought being quiet meant I was weak." Gregory moved in his seat. "Look, I don't know what kind of trick this is, but Keanu lifted his hand. Not to shush him. Just to end the talk. "You don't need to know who I am," he said. Then Keanu reached into his jacket and took out a black card. It had shiny platinum edges. No name, just the powerful logo of Volta Capital. He held it up between two fingers so that Declan, Elise, and everyone in first class could see. Then he put it back in his pocket. Gregory opened his mouth to say something smart, but no words came out. Keanu looked at Elise. "You moved me without asking my name," he said. "You judged me by how I looked, not who I am." Elise's face turned red. Her voice was shaky. I was just following the rules." "No," Keanu said calmly. "You were following bias and calling it rules." Then he turned to Declan. Atlantic Air broke its own ethics rules. Clause 7C is now in use. Volta Capital is taking back all its money. The deal with Mad Air is stopped. And all investors are being warned. Declan's legs almost gave out. You're serious?" Keanu stepped forward to seat 1A. He gently placed his hand on the headrest. "I gave this company a chance to show real values. Not just fancy ads. You failed badly. He sat down. The silence in the cabin got even heavier. One row back, an older man leaned toward his wife. They had no idea who he was, he whispered. They didn't care who he was, until they had to, the woman whispered back. Keanu leaned back, buckled his seatbelt, and closed his eyes. He wasn't just getting his seat back. He was taking back control. And the whole world was about to see it. The trouble didn't wait until landing. Just minutes after Keanu sat in seat 1A, news spread everywhere. TV screens in airports switched from sports to breaking news. Social media blew up. Flight 447. Keanu owns the Atlantic. Seat 1A. Justice. CNN showed a line. Volta Capital pulls $500 million from Atlantic Air after the owner is removed mid-flight. But inside the plane, things felt different. Quieter. Colder. More real. Declan stood near the galley, pale, barely staying upright. His crew tablet kept updating every 30 seconds. Bad news after bad news. An investigation had started. The leadership was in trouble. Reports about bad behavior were piling up. He was already getting messages from the company's lawyers. None of them were good. Elise, who had once been calm and sure, now sat alone on the jump seat behind the curtain. Her hands were tight. Her face was frozen. Her name was now all over the internet, part of a trending story called "The Flight Attendant Who Judged Keanu Reeves." She didn't look at anyone. She didn't talk. She just stared at her screen, watching herself become the symbol of something very wrong, how people in uniforms can still be unfair. As for Gregory Thorne, his power was gone. The champagne he used to spin proudly now sat untouched. He stared straight ahead, pale, his jaw tight. He wasn't the most important man on the plane anymore. He didn't even matter. There has to be some mistake, he whispered, but even he didn't believe it. Keanu didn't smile. He didn't brag. He just opened his notebook and wrote one last sentence. Then he closed it slowly. This wasn't about payback. This wasn't for show. This was about making things right. From the back of the plane, Miles, the young flight attendant, watched it all happen. He hadn't said anything for hours. But now, something inside him began to wake up. He walked slowly toward Keanu's seat. "Sir," he said in a quiet voice, "I just wanted to say I'm sorry." Keanu looked up, not angry, but with kind, serious eyes that made Miles feel a little nervous. "You weren't the problem," Keanu said gently. "But now you understand. So choose who you want to be next time." Miles nodded. That truth felt heavy on his shoulders, like strong armor. At the front of the plane, the door to the pilot's room opened. Captain Harris walked out. He looked calm, but his face showed he had just heard something important from his bosses. He walked to Keanu and spoke very politely. "Mr. Reeves," he said, "we just learned who you are. I want to say sorry for what happened, from me and the whole flight crew." Keanu nodded. He didn't smile. He was serious, like someone who had been through a lot and deserved respect. "Saying sorry is a good start," he said. "But real change is what happens when no one is watching. Fix that." Then he turned to look out the window. He didn't say anything else. But his silence said more than words ever could. The plane, Flight 447, went down through the clouds smoothly toward Zurich. The lights inside the cabin turned soft and dim, like fancy planes do to make people feel calm. But it wasn't really calm. Not at all. By the time the wheels touched the ground, the big bosses at Atlantic Air were already freaking out. In office rooms in cities like New York and London, phones were ringing, lawyers were talking, and assistants kept saying the same thing. "He owns us." Inside the plane, no one clapped when they landed. No smiles, no fake cheers. Everyone was quiet. The feeling in the air had changed. People who once felt proud now looked down at their shoes. Gregory Thorne sat with his arms crossed, his eyes empty. His good name was falling apart. His business was crashing. His rich friends were leaving him, and now people were checking all his past work. He didn't just say something rude to a man. He said it to the man who was more powerful than his own boss. In the tiny kitchen area, called the galley, Elise sat on the fold-down seat, shocked. Her name was all over the internet, but not in a good way. She didn't say a word when two men in dark suits walked in with airport police and showed their badges. "Miss Green," one of them said, "you need to stay on the plane for questions." She nodded. No arguing, no excuses. She knew this wasn't just one bad choice. It was something she had done again and again, and now people saw it clearly. Beside her, Declan got told the same thing. His hands shook as he gave them his crew tablet. In the airport, 3 more serious people waited. But not for the crew. This time they were waiting for Gregory Thorne. "Mr. Thorne," one of them said, not showing any feeling, "you can't fly with us or any of our partner airlines anymore. Your accounts are being checked. You'll be walking out now." Gregory opened his mouth, but no words came. The man who once felt like a king in the sky now had nothing. Keanu Reeves still sat in seat 1A as everyone else left the plane. He had no bodyguards, no group of people around him. He wore simple clothes, sat tall, and looked calm. As he left the plane, he walked past Miles, who stood in the galley, eyes full of tears. "Sir," Miles whispered, "thank you." Keanu stopped for just a moment. "When someone's silence feels wrong," he said, "say something." Miles nodded. He would remember that moment forever, longer than any paycheck. Outside the plane, a small group was waiting. Not reporters, not fans. Just workers from the airline. One of them was Lena Caro, the new boss in charge of fixing big problems. She reached out her hand. "Mr. Reeves, we are very sorry," she began. But Keanu just walked past her with a small nod. He didn't need to hear sorry anymore. He wanted people to do something. 3 days later, a letter showed up online. It was from Miles. It was a picture of a real letter he wrote with his own hand, called The Cost of Silence. In it, he said he was sorry and promised to give 6 months of his pay to a fund for airline workers who had been treated badly. He ended the letter with, "Silence has a price. I'm paying mine first." A company named Volta gave even more money, 10 times more, but didn't tell anyone it was them. And Keanu? He didn't post online. He didn't brag. He just kept working quietly. He started changing things, seat by seat, one flight at a time. He didn't need to yell or be the loudest person. In a world where people think money means everything, his quiet strength showed the truth. His last message wasn't spoken out loud. It was in what he did. Power isn't about shouting. It's about what you fix when no one is watching. If you liked this story, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below and let me know what you think. And don't forget to subscribe for more thrilling adventures, mysteries, and unforgettable moments. Your support keeps these stories alive and the creativity flowing. Thanks for watching. I can't wait to see you in the next video.